Hey everyone, if you are watching this, you are watching the recording of Understanding Your Craft with Comics Devices by Reimena Yee. We are going to have this recorded and it will be available in the co-op library. It may or may not be available up on the YouTube as well. Let me get you introduced to Reimena. Reimena Yee, she, they, is an Eisner-nominated strange and fancy cartoonist and educator. Her graphic novels and webcomics are recognized by the Eisner, Ignatz, and the ALA. She is the curator of the Comics Devices Library and one of the co-founders of the Cartoonist Cooperative. All right, take it away, Reimena.
All right. Hi. Hello, everyone. I hope you've been having a really good summer camp this week. So, welcome to Understanding Your Craft with Comics Devices. I am Reimena Yee, and I'll be giving you a general overview of the visual literary techniques that arise from the possibilities of comics as a medium and these techniques are also called comics devices. So I would like to start off with this really resonant post by Tumblr user Mumblesplash. So Mumblesplash says, comics as an art form make me insane. They're so difficult to do well. There's so many different ways to make sequential artwork, and most of them are deeply unintuitive. Onomatopoeia that feels completely ridiculous to put down often reads seamlessly. Panels on a page become a fractally nested image composition challenge that's only possible to lose because if you do a good job, no one would notice. You have to direct the reader's eyes on a specific path across the page, but also account for the fact that they won't follow it. Comic time isn't linear. If the order event isn't crystal clear, the story becomes incomprehensible. Sometimes you need to do this on purpose. All this for a medium almost universally considered less effective than animation and less respectable than plain text. Even its own name doesn't take it seriously. I am pretty sure that, and I hope that all of you here are fans of comics. We know what it is and why we are in love with it. Comics are a sophisticated art form blending image and text. And in fact, in comics, the image is text and the text is image to tell all kinds of stories. In the publishing industry and a lot of public outreach, we often hear the justification that comics is important because it aids in textual literacy, that it helps children to develop reading and vocabulary, and if those supporters are more sophisticated, they will bring up visual literacy that, you will teach children and adults how to read and comprehend images. However, that's not all there is to it in comics. Yes, it is image and text, but it's not just image and text. In reality, comics is more nuanced, more complicated, messier, sophisticated than that. In fact, one of the really amazing qualities of comics is its ability to utilize so many literacies. So here on the slide, it describes like the different types of literacies that are present when making and reading comics. So you have linguistic literacy, and that emerges in narration and dialogue. And then you have visual literacy that emerges in mood, color, tone, composition, amongst other things. Gestural literacy, which applies to body language, facial expression, gestures. Spatial literacy, so that arises in page layouts, in composition, or the form or shape of the panels. And then you have oral literacy, so that comes up in visual representations or imanara, which is like lines and symbols that uh that indicate a sound, but it's not sound literally. So this ability to apply multiple forms of literacy within a single medium, both to understand it and to create it, is called multimodality. And uh, these literacies can be myriad. So as I've described in the slide before, it can be oral, spatial, linguistic, gestural, and visual. But it also includes other secondary literacies, such as being able to read the clock, being able to read the map. That is a type of literacy. So in the academic space, comics are referred to as multimodal medium, and although as creators, we don't always consciously think about it. Uh, but when we are drawing or planning how to do a layout, or how to depict a scene or detail, we are constantly and always making choices about how to evoke and convey and depict specific experiences using multiple visual literary techniques that touch on these various literacies. So the execution of these choices is subject to our creative goals that apply to our readership and ourselves as creators. And in the next few slides, I will show you how that is the case. So, um, comics make use of our linguistic or textual literacy, so the ability to read words basically, but also to comprehend them, to get emotion, context, and subtext. And to also follow like the thread of narrative, so from beginning to middle to end, to be able to like connect the dots and make meaning out of it. But where comics diverges from a typical novel is how we make use of the form of the text. That is the shape and the color and the size of the dialogue, as well as the text's container, so the caption box, the speech bubbles, and as well as the elements that surround the text, so the characters, the symbols, the imanada, etc., to do really interesting things for how our readership can experience and hear, quote unquote, the text. So I have a couple of examples here up on the slide. So we have this comic on the left from One Punch Man, and it is using a very specific technique to uh, like convey uh, like the characters like overwhelmed as another like yaps a lot, and it's also like allowing us the reader to also like experience that overwhelm because we see this huge giant block of text and it's like, oh man, do we even want to read all of that? And that allows the punchline to land. And then on the uh, page on the right, we have a family. They are talking about like, prepping for dinner. And uh, so uh, whatever they are seeing is represented by the shape of the speech bubble. So dinner's ready, and the speech bubble is in the shape of a dinner plate with cutlery. And I made your favorite, which is like fish. So speech bubble is in the shape of fish, etc., etc. So like, you know, this is like a really like comic specific thing that's only possible in this medium. And relatedly, uh, comics also plays with like all literacy, sound literacy. So not only do we have to imagine the tone or the volume or emotion of the sound in a speech balloon or sound effect, but we also have to visually interpret or transcribe both sound and silence, as well as languages that we are not familiar with or languages that are made up. And in order to make use of like the myriad possibilities of texture and oral literacies, cartoonists and letterers selectively use various techniques or comics devices to play with how text and sound and dialogue are depicted and received. Here are only like a sample of devices which are present in the previous example comics pages. And these devices are one-on lettering, so lettering that like pushes against or uh, runs over, runs on over the boundaries of like its container. And then you have evocative lettering, so lettering through line work or shape, uh, like uh, tries to depict a specific type of sensation or emotion. And then you have telltale balloon. So balloons that take on the shape of whatever the subject is speaking about. And then finally, you have corporeal lettering. So lettering that becomes solid to the point that it can be felt or seen or manipulated by the characters around it. All right, so we're moving on to visual literacy. So visual literacy, it describes like our awareness of visual art as culture and our ability to infer meaning from pictures by drawing connections between images placed next to each other and to images in context of their society and also the like how images relate to our lived experiences. And so to demonstrate, I want to quickly walk you through this sequence here, this comic page on slide, which is from a graphic biography of the artist Rembrandt by the cartoonist Typex. So the context of this sequence is Rembrandt being a drunken pest to his neighbors. And first you can see like how the style Typex chooses is itself an homage to Rembrandt's art style, specifically his work with etchings. And if you're familiar with Rembrandt's oeuvre, this is a lovely way to represent his life and his artistry. And additionally, the art style feels like it's from the era and it adds to the immersiveness of the historical setting. And secondly, Typex actively makes use of the style he chose to create a setting and tell a story. So the monochrome colors of black and orange make it feel like drawings on age paper. But they also set the tone and the mood and the time of the sequence, which is at night. So the dark, moody colors also represent the quote unquote darkest point of Rembrandt's life. And then finally, the wonky panel shapes visually evoke Rembrandt's drunken state. So even though uh, on the surface, this is a very simple looking four panel grid, there's actually a lot behind this grid. There's a lot that this is like referencing and evoking, and it's tapping into our exposure and our knowledge of art history and our visual experience of drunkenness or nausea and our association with certain colors and color combinations and lots more. You know, like if you really want to really deeply interrogate like the meaning behind this like sequence, you can definitely go through many different paths. And this also applies to like the entire book. So there's a lot that can go on in a graphic novel. And here are some of the comics devices that I use in the Tabex page that I show you. So here we have rhythm, uh, which is how like uh the like basically just like the rhythm of the panels, for pacing and also for sound and motion. And then you have evocation, but in general. So line works and shapes and stuff to evoke like certain sensations. And then you have uh, graphic illusion, which is allusion to like visual art or like something a visual object and it's represented in like the comic. And then you have tracking, which is uh, following the motion of a subject. And then you have the master view, which is basically a combination of tracking and separate panels having a shared background. And then evocative lettering, which we described before, and then also color fade and color pop. So using colors to uh, either highlight or fade certain details. And then comics also make use of our sense literacy, so the ability to connect real world sensory and psychological perceptions to lines, shapes, and colors. So you can see here on this example in the slide how uh, Ryoki Kue uses screen tones and different line weights to evoke the texture of the cloth, the woopiness of the egg, and the fluffiness of the bread. And this is an example of the comics device evocation. And then finally, comics engages in our kinesthetic literacy, so our ability to locate and feel where bodies are in space and what those body parts are doing and feeling. So yes, look at this page for a second. Uh, all right, now look at it again. Oops. So you can see that the dancer, she is moving, based on like the motion of our eyes, where how it follows the threads of the panels. So with just a few swerves of a pen and by our eyes following the flow of the lines and filling in the spaces in between the panels, we can simulate the motion of a ballerina. There is now more to the story. It is not just images on a flat surface, it is images that have like this illusion of movement. And all of this just from like a few lines and shapes. Isn't that wow? Isn't that amazing? Uh, so because of this like multiple use and mingling of literacies, the possibilities of visual narrative within a flat canvas are staggering. So over the past 100 years of comics in its modern form, comics creators have developed a very rich catalog of artistic and rhetorical and literary techniques to shortcut various storytelling problems and produce a very specific effect. And these specific effects are subject to their creative goals and their intent. So you may have encountered some of these techniques in the world before. occurring repeatedly across various comics. And then you might have asked, oh, well, this looks good. I would like to talk to other artists about why I think it looks good, but I just don't know how. Or maybe you might have thought, hey, I've seen this technique before. So it's characters who move out of their panels into the next, and I wonder what this technique is called, so I can find other examples of it and use them as inspiration or study aids. Or, hey, I've been using these tiny disembodied heads inside speech bubbles a lot in my work, but I don't know if this technique has a name. Or, sort of unrelatedly, oh my God, why does journalism and art criticism keep describing comics as like just spam boom power or lesser versions of them? Like, don't they know how to talk about comics? Don't they realize how cool comics can be? So hopefully, some of you may have other hobbies that are not just comics. So, music or filmmaking, writing, fine art, performance art, all those other like uh, uh, artistic like interests. So in each of these like art forms, there is language that describes like the medium specific stock techniques or devices. So these devices can be technical or narrative that creatives use to produce or facilitate an aesthetic, emotional, or narrative effect and to convey meaning to each other and the audience. So I'm going to walk you through some really basic examples of like kinds of devices used in different art forms. And I'm just doing this so that to show you that comics also has these devices and it's so important for us, to understand and to internalize these devices, to be able to know how to speak about it so that we can uh, be able to speak amongst ourselves about what we are doing and also to the general public and to people who do not make comics. Right. So the first of these would be in poetry. So uh, a lot of poetry's devices it stems from poetry's preoccupation for the sound of words, of speaking, and of language. So anything like creative or artistic or interesting or aesthetic that they do with their art form, it is related to how words sound, how words come out of their mouths, and how words are perceived by their listener. And so poets will consider the arrangement of their sounds and the resulting effects of it, of their writing to produce their poetry. And one of these devices that they use to make their work is sibilance. So sibilance is a poetic device that uh, involves the usage of hissing consonants. So word syllables or pieces of words that produce like a hissing, sinister, or sleeping effect. So in text and in speaking, this is represented by how often these consonants appear. And so when you are speaking a sentence that has sibilants in it, the effect, what it does when you speak those sentences, it forces our mouth to assume a shape. So tongue between teeth, teeth close together. Like so, the serpent that did sting thy father's life now wears his crown. So the frequency of the consonants of the letter S, the sound that evokes like the imagery of the serpent, uh, and also like the sinisterness based on like whatever the sentence is talking about. And then similarly, you have plosive, so it is also like sibilance, but plosive refers to hard sounds. So boom, pow, poof, to produce like a really violent, bumpy, and booming effect. uh, and in speech when you are saying a sentence that uh, contains plosives. It is forcing your mouth to assume a shape, to force air out to make those sounds. So, examples from this passage: breaks my pate across, plucks off my beard, blows it in thy face. So you can both hear the sound of the plosive, and you can also see like how it evokes like a punching motion, a punching kind of emotion. Uh, so with both these devices, sibilance and plosive, it creates effects that outside of the normal way of speaking. And introducing them into your poem makes the part where the device is used, it makes it feel different. It makes it more symbolic and more flavorful. And they are very subtle effects and not something that many like casual poetry enjoyers pick up on, but the audience feels the impact. They benefit from it. They benefit from the atmosphere and the environment that these devices create. And the same goes for comics, and the same also goes for film. So, which is all about uh, poetry of images in motion. And film will also have devices that stem from the process of photography, of editing, and also of sound. Because film is also a multimodal medium. And in this example here on the slide, this filmic device is called a match cut. So a match cut is when a scene transitions or is cut to another scene with the same staging, with continuity in the subject's posing. And this is also a device that you'll see a form of it in comics as well. And then here's another filmic device, which is a tracking shot. So a camera follows the subject's movements, and we also see tracking, a version of tracking in comics, but how tracking is depicted is different due to the physical realities of like drawings on paper versus filming. And then in musical theater, which is about song and storytelling and cam, there is a musical narrative device. So this is called layered verse or polyphony. So this is when multiple singers they sing their respective verses at the same time and with their dialogue speaking over each other. And um, I have provided a link in the chat, but it's also called Down Once More from the Phantom of the Opera. And it comes at like the specific part of the song that I want you to listen to, it comes at 360 seconds, the mark. And uh, yes, you can also see in the slide like how I have talked about it. Polyphony is also a device used in comics too, and that's usually represented by speech bubbles that bleed into each other or even overlap. And I only bring up like the most obvious examples, but the many devices of these art forms are well documented and discussed among practitioners and critics and scholars, and the outcomes of that knowledge building and that knowledge sharing are so robust that they have become part of our cultural education. And you may even like recall learning about some of these devices in English class or animation school or something similar. Although comics have been around as long as film, its devices have not been as familiar to the public or even to comics creators themselves. So a lot of our education as comics creators, it comes from osmosis. So from reading as many comics as possible, reading them so much that eventually at some point we internalize like the form and the structure and the tricks uh, that our peers and our favorite comics creators use. So we see a page layout, we see a way a panel is done or whatever, and we just like absorb it into our heads, and then we replicate that in our own way, in our own work, and that is how we do it. We just naturally and organically learn comics through the reading and the making of comics, but we don't really like have like a really like an established structure, uh, and an established knowledge base for like what this is. So it's like we absorb all this knowledge, but we don't even know like the names of the or the words to describe this knowledge. And this often means that we often have difficulty explaining to other people um, what we are trying to do with our comics. Um, and this becomes even more like obvious when we move out of our comics bubble and into having to interact with uh, editors, publishers, librarians, journalists, people who do not have that uh, intuitive familiarity with comics form as we do. So it makes it very difficult to like we understand why comics is so cool, all the possibilities of the visual medium, but it makes it very difficult for us to talk to other people about why, to get them to understand it. Um, so uh, this is something that has plagued us for a long time now, and this is not to say that this knowledge does not exist or attempts to uh, create language for this knowledge has not been done before. A lot of there's a lot in comic scholarship that has done that, but you know, uh, academia and comics making, the actual the industry and all that, they rarely interact with each other like deeply. So uh, a device that has been recognized or has a name in comics, like in practicing comics, may not be uh, like discovered quote unquote yet by academia and vice versa. So there's that disconnect. So this is partly why I've started the Comics Devices Library, just so that we can bridge the gap between scholarship and like the actual practice of making comics, and then to ensure that there is a centralized place uh, to document and name and describe and show examples of like comics devices. And it turns out comics has a lot of devices, and there's about 70 of those, in fact. And and the reason why there's so many devices in comics is because as a modern hybrid visual literary art form that draws influence from its cousins and its predecessors, uh, comics borrows a lot of devices from visual art, from poetry, rhetoric, and film and theater. So as you can see here on this slide, uh, you can see two devices that have origins in another art form. So you have the match cut, so that's a filmic device. And then you also have caesura or enjambment, and that is from poetry. So uh so just because like we borrow so much from like other forms, this means as creators, we have like a huge giant toolbox of extant devices, existing devices from other mediums to help construct our layouts. However, comics has its own fascination for bringing images to life from only a flat surface. Like that is our uh like specialty. That is our preoccupation. It's through like evoking like different sensations, different movements, sounds, all of that, just from flatness alone. And uh, that is done through like uh, the arrangement of panels and gutters, and also how these panels and gutters, lines and shapes, how these elements they interact uh, with time and space. And because of this unique interaction of various different elements, comics also contains unique devices that are not found elsewhere. So here on the slide we have a really comic specific device. So telltale balloons, and then also back panel and fore panel, which is like um, it's uh, a double layering of panels, where a back panel refers to a panel that is placed behind another panel, um, and then fore panel is a panel that's placed in front of several panels. Um, and uh, I think it's really cool that you know, there's so much here that we can use, that we're spoiled for choice as comics creators, that not only can we borrow and adapt devices from other forms, we also have our own and also still have the potential to make new ones. I think that's really cool. And since we already have this variety and hugeness in our devices toolbox, we may as well get to know them all and try to use them. And not only just to make our layouts and craft better, but to also pursue all of the possibilities that comics still offers. Because after all, if you really boil it down, a really, really nice, or even just like a basic comics layout, is an arrangement of panels and gutters. And these arrangements are then styled by whatever devices are being applied. So each device has a defined function, and that function will inform the cartoonist about how the panels and the gutters should be drawn and arranged to create like an intended effect. So here on the slide, I have a layout from Touchstone's webcomic. Um, Hannah is not a boy's name, and like this is a really fun layout. And it's styled by the device's flow, lettering, pop-up, and evocation. So you can see like how those devices like transform like that layout and make it like really uh unique and really cool. And then you have this layout by Joe Matt. And the primary device that is informing the layout, how the panels and gutters are arranged, is transitional curvature. So transitional curvature is like panels that are ordered in a specific way to create like a shape, like a gradual, like a spiral shape, more or less, or curvy shape. And then this one, uh, drawn by Alvaro Martinez Bueno. This it's primarily like styled by the tracking device. So in this layout, it's quite small, but generally, we are just following Wonder Woman going down the stairs and like uh, punching and fighting all the bad guys, and we see uh, like repeated like images of her as she goes down the stairs. It's not like this whole layout is not broken up by gutters. There are no gutters, quote unquote, uh, on this layout, but we can still see like a separation of like scenes and motion. And this is because it's styled by the device that is being used here. And then we have this uh, layout by Xavier Rodriguez, and uh, it's styled by the device model layout or panel. So this is device where panels are ordered and arranged and shaped to evoke the body plan or form of what it is like depicting. So you can see like how uh, the panels on this layout, they are taking on the shape of the heroine. Um, and it partly forms her body. So that's how it is styled. And basically, to generalize and to like put it in another way, a layout is like a machine or a body of story, of meaning. Uh, and then like all the devices inside uh, that body, that machine, are like the organs that help the body do the work that is designed to do. At the same time, devices are pretty flexible and modular. Uh, so these devices, they can be placed anywhere on the canvas that best suits the meaning, that story or emotion that you want to achieve. So they don't have any like specific like fixed space, like, oh, you need to put these devices on the left side of the page or this part of the page. No, like it's not like that. You can put it anywhere on the page. Um, and different devices also can be used to interpret the same scene. So there is not one specific device that is like perfect for anything, or like one type of scene or one type of story is like only suited for one device. So like devices can be applied to different types of like storytelling, and also and like a storytelling device, a piece of storytelling can also uh like absorb like different types of devices, any kind of device. Again, it really depends on like how you apply it and what your goals are as a creator. Um, and with regards to like how what kind of devices like suit, again, uh, all of them will work. And you know what eventually becomes the device that you choose, what makes that one device quote unquote better than the other, it really depends on your artistic goals. Uh, so here on the slide, you can see like three different ways to catch a fish uh, with like three devices that are used to style it. So you have the frame panel, um, and uh, like a tracking device. So like even from just like using the tracking device, there are multiple ways for you to like uh, design a layout based on it. And additionally, devices can also be custom fitted to purpose. So even with like their base functions, even with their basic descriptions, like like in this, for example, in this like the in balloon panel, which on its basic level, its default level is like it basically is describes a speech bubble that acts as a kind of like panel. So it's not just text in it, but it's also like a story or images, that's contained inside that in balloon panel. So that is its base function. But it can also be twisted. It can also be subverted to become something a bit more complicated and more interesting than that default purpose. And this type of like uh, customization, it can be done to like play it straight or comically or subversively. So it's just like, you know, it is also related to devices being flexible. You can just like do whatever you want. Again, it's like it's really up to your creativity. But ultimately, the importance of comics devices, especially in your practice, it can be summed up by this definition of literary devices by the writer Sean Glatch. So Sean Glatch says literary devices are ways of taking writing beyond its straightforward literal meaning. In that sense, they are techniques for helping guide the reader in how to read the piece. Central to all literary devices is the quality of connection by establishing or examining relationships between things. Literary devices encourage the reader to perceive and interpret the world in new ways. So, an effective comic layout uh, is one that is able to uh, express care for its readership and also the cartoonist's artistic choices. An effective layout allows readers to move across the page, across the canvas, and to allow readers to discover the logic between the panels and to create uh, or like assume their own interpretation of what the characters are feeling, saying, doing, anything. All this without compromising the vision of the cartoonist at all. So when you are creating a comics layout, we are essentially making a blueprint for how our reader experiences our work and how we want our work to be experienced. And it's not a blueprint in the sense of like coddling them or dumbing down our concepts, but in ensuring that no matter how weird or ambitious or emotionally precarious our vision is, our readership will continue being locked in and to trust in the visual narrative journey that we are creating for them. However, in order to be able to like create effective ideas, we also have to become like uh, really good readers uh, ourselves and to expose ourselves to as many types of comics, many types of layouts as possible. And then we must be able to also be able to confidently articulate, to express what we see and think and feel whenever we uh, experience a sequential narrative. So basically, like, it's not just that we have to be very good readers, we also have to be very articulate readers, very articulate like creators. Like, we have to understand very deeply the how the comics form interacts when a reader is looking at it and also when the creator is making it. So it's like we have to understand our form intimately to the point that we are able to like be able to like confidently and uh like really like passionately talk about it and be able to share that joy with other people. Uh And so the first step to attaining that kind of clarity is to become like informed and knowledgeable readers. That's what I said. And also like understanding and familiarizing ourselves with comics devices will aid us in that goal. Uh yes, so we are coming pretty close to the end of the presentation. So I wanted to do like a really quick exercise for a little bit, since we have some time. Uh so Here I have a layout by Kevin Huizenga. Um, and this layout contains several types of devices in it. Um, and basically what this layout is trying to do is like it's incorporating and mixing like several devices to create like this interesting and meta vision of time. So like the years are passing as the character goes on a walk. So I'm just going to give you like maybe like a minute to think about what kinds of devices that he's using. You do not have to know the names of the devices, but you just sort of like try to guess what techniques that Huizenga is using to uh, like uh, depict this narrative and to style his layouts. Even if you just only know the device by its function, that is fine. Um, so yes, just a minute to look at this and think about it for a second. And then I'll be you do not have to answer this if you don't want to. I'll because I'll also be walking you through like the types of what that the devices that he's using. So yeah, just a bit to think about it and to admire this layout. Okay, yeah, maybe that's like pretty close to a minute. Hee hee. Um, so first you can see tracking. So you are following the movement of the character. And on top of that, he is also crossing over from panel to panel. He is stepping out of the borders of one panel and entering another. And you can also see that crossing within the panels is happening too. So if you remove the borders of all the panels in the top half, you will see that they are actually one single background, which is the neighborhood. And the same can be done for the bottom half of like removing the lines and revealing that it's a single image of a neighborhood. So that, but in the way that Kevin Kusanka has done it, he has broken it up into like with borders inside it. And so like, the background is like crossing within each other, like inside. So, and then the next devices that you can see is overlapping panels. So panels that often in comics layouts, panels are often exclusive with each other. So it's like they are separated from one another by a gap in the middle. That's the gutter. But with overlapping panels, the gutter is disregarded. The gutter does not exist, and like panels sometimes touch each other or go over or under each other. So it's like they overlap. Um, and that is what you can see at the bottom half here. And then you can also see that some meta paneling is happening. So the character, he's touching the border as if the border is an actual thing that exists uh, and in his world, as if he is like stepping out of the frame. And then finally, the two halves of the layout are what is called a master wheel. So this is a high order device. And it's a device that is more for study than for actual like uh, creating. But basically, what it is that it's a specific set of devices that are being used together. So, like these devices are crossing of a partial or fully continuous background, tracking of a character, and finally flow. So these three devices that are being used together, they create a single independent scene, and that is a master view. And basically, like a master view is like all these devices together, and you interpret it as a single thing. not as separate like panels. It's a single huge giant uh universal panel. But anyway, yes, that is the presentation. That is um why comics devices are important for creators to uh like like internalize and to know and to get interested in and to also apply it not just in their practice but also in their outreach to other people. Uh, and there's enough time for us to have a question and answer or conversation about like comics devices. So if you have any, the floor is open. Please put your questions in the chat and I will try my best to answer them.
That was awesome, Reimena. Thank you so much. Uh, Adrian, thank you for joining us. You're just in time for the Q&A. And I have a few questions to get us started. Um, in addition to the Comics Devices Library, where would you recommend that people go to learn more about comics devices or comics scholarship in general?
Okay, so uh the comics devices library is like it's based on the work of Scott McCloud. So Scott McCloud's like understanding comics and making comics are foundational to the comics devices library, in addition to like, all comics scholarship. Uh, so those two tags will be the first that I'll go, but uh, Scott McCloud's books are 30 years old at this point, and um, he's he does talks about like comics as an art form really well, but it's also very technical. So it may or may not like uh work for some people. So, but those two would be the ones that I recommend, and also with caution, uh, Will Eisner's sequential art, I think that's called. Yes, so Will Eisner has a book that talks about his thoughts and his uh understandings of comics as a medium of storytelling, and he's like basically that book is just to like teach like fellow artists like how he does his like layouts, what he's thinking when he's doing it, all the principles of like sequential art. And that text is also foundational to Scott McCloud's two textbooks. So like go look at it, but also with caution because Will Eisner is an old white man, so he has some old white man thoughts about certain things. But the like the stuff about comics is like really really useful.
Awesome, thank you.
Mhm.
And do you have a favorite device that you use or any that you would like to use more?
Oh, I have this theory that every cartoonist has a device that they love to use a lot. So that's their signature device. And mine is called recto-verso parallel. So let me uh move out of this for a bit. Comics devices. Uh, Yeah, so this is recto-verso parallel, and it's basically like um the right and left sides of a two page layer are being utilized uh like for cross-cutting and call to response. So like, uh and I use it a lot in my work. So I could have like one character saying something on the left side and then another character saying like responding to them on the right side of the page. And then I also use it to like depict like two different events that are running in parallel uh with each other. So like that's the that's my signature device. That's what I use a lot. Um, and you can see like the examples here are all my all for my work. Uh, yeah.
I love that. I love seeing what
Mm,
people
mm.
can't help but use in their work because it's just like a magnet.
Yeah.
So cool. Um, do you how would you recommend that people introduce this language of comics devices to non-cartoonists?
I think it really depends on like the context that you're in. Um, like I mean, there are many different ways of like introducing like comics devices. So it's like if you are interacting with an editor and you are not quite confident on their ability to, um, like read comics, you can just casually send them a link, put
Just
put
so
place the link in their
casually.
script. It's a little bit of shade, but uh, that's one way to do it. But editors are more well placed to be able to like receive like
Mm,
this type of information because they already have like understanding of literary devices and
mm,
poetic devices. They already have that, so it's like making that jump to visual literary devices won't be so difficult there for them. It's just more that this is a new art form. It's a new thing for them, so it's like they have to like take time to familiarize themselves. So that's like it's
mm,
fine. But for people who don't have like prior knowledge before of any type of like devices, um, that's something that you would either have to like really like you really have to know the devices very well to be able to like boil it down to its essence if you want to speak about specific devices. And then also it's very useful to have examples to show people because uh it's comics. It's best explained when you see the comic, right? It's best explained instead of like talking about comics. You have to show the comic in order for it to present itself in the best light. So it's like it's the same with comics devices. You have to show the device in action. You have to show the comics page where the device is being used, and you have to show it to other people and describe to it like what is happening. Um, and ideally you do it with like several examples in order for it to click. And again, uh this is also how we as cartoonists learn how to make comics is from reading a lot of comics and also like slowly like seeing the patterns and uh like familiarizing yourself with like specific like devices, even though we don't know the names, we don't know what the function is, but we see the patterns, we see the effects, and uh it becomes like a thing. So you just apply that to like the general audience and it usually works. But yes, again, it depends on like context and who you're speaking to.
that makes sense. And that kind of leads me to one other question I was thinking of was what advice would you have for people who are learning about this language that they already know, and what advice would you give them if they wanted to more consciously incorporate comics devices into their work to become more articulate, as you said?
I think again it's just like just really like reading consciously and creating consciously. Um, so in order to become like articulate like creators, we have to learn how to articulate what we are reading, So that means like reading more comics and also reading more comics actively, instead of just like opening the page and just flipping and oh go hee hee, I really enjoy all the art. You have to like as an active uh reader, you have to like really like see the page, see the layout, very deeply. Uh, and try to piece out like what is like you have these questions running in your head uh like what am I feeling or what am I experiencing when I'm reading this page? Um, and then it's like how am I experiencing it? So that starts getting into like, what has the creator drawn? What are the techniques that they have used in order to uh like create this feeling that I am experiencing right now, like this effect that I'm experiencing. So like you start thinking about like the creator's intent, and then you try to understand, okay, what is the creator trying to do when they are using this technique? You know, outside of like my own like uh experiences, and whether or not, and then also whether or not the creator's like intent matches what you're feeling. Uh, and it's basically like you are having like a kind of sort of like a one person conversation with the page, with the book that you're reading. And what this does, as you keep asking questions to yourself, you keep answering your own questions and like having like the book to bounce off of, is that you start to develop like your own like understanding of comics, your own ability to like interpret and analyze like what uh, a creator is doing, and in that way you will transfer this like skill into your own work, into your own practice. So then when you finally sit down on the table and at um you look at your script, you look at your layouts, and then you can start asking yourself these questions like, what is my intent? What do I want the reader to experience? And what sort of devices can I use to make them feel that way? And what can I do to try to make sure that the gap between my intent and their experiences uh, is as close together as possible? Or, you know, again, depending on your intent, you could also like diverge that. So uh, like essentially, you know, you just have to like be actively asking yourself questions whenever you encounter a comic, whether it's your own comic or other people's comic. And like the devices library helps to ensure that you're able to recognize some of these techniques and give a name to it. Um, but again, you know, it's like it's all a process of like familiarization and like consistency.
That makes a lot of sense. I feel like that's what we hear. Authors get told a lot, read in your genre, read a lot of books that you want to write like, and that makes sense that it
Mhm.
would apply to comics too. We have another question in the chat from Lulo that says, do you think talking about comics devices with other kinds of artists can make them more interested in reading or possibly making them?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that is possible, you know, because like uh I get interested in other art forms. So like, I'm interested in like musical theater, like because like I really enjoy like how, you know, like stagecraft and like how like, you know, set design and all that like is able to like evoke like a specific like type of like feeling or how it supports the story. Like I really enjoy that. And like I think that's how I also got into comics, because originally I wanted to do like novels. So I was really familiar with like literary devices. Um, but what got me into comics is that, you know, realizing that comics has a lot of uh like techniques and a lot of like potential that is not accessible in novels because of like the different formats. And like just reading that comic and just get being really intrigued by the possibilities of the medium, by the devices that I'm seeing, but I'm not able to understand what they are, not be able to name them yet. Like just seeing them in action, like compelled me to become a comics creator. And here I am. Now I've got the library. So uh yep, definitely 100%. I think talking more about like comics as an art form will really get like other kinds of artists to be interested in like uh thinking about like what they can do, like how they can contribute to it. So yes.
And speaking of contributing, how can people support your work with the Comics Devices Library?
I'm always looking for more comics page examples of devices. Uh, so I would really appreciate if anyone finds a device that is being used well or interestingly in any type of like comic that they are reading or even making. Uh, the library is always open to those submissions. Um, because one of the projects that I'm doing right now is like building a gallery attached to each device, and that gallery will show all the ways that that device can be used by different types of creators. Um, so that is a project for the library. And then also another way to contribute to the comics devices library is to, um, if you think that the library uh, needs a new device, so you found a device in the wild, but it's not yet in the library, please submit it along with the example page. And then also, if a device that is already like existing in the library, you think that it needs a bit more like improvement in terms of like the explanation or like the description, then yes, you can submit your feedback. And then finally, I think uh the normal quote unquote way to contribute to the coins device would just be like just sharing it really, and also like and then using the library for its like intended purpose, which is just to like to teach people how to talk about comics on its own terms. So whether you're using the device, the library comics library device as a starting point for teaching comics to children, uh, teaching them to make comics or to read comics, or passing it on to editors to improve their fluency in in comics, or just sharing it in general, or using it for yourself to inform your comics making. Like that's the way. That's the main way to uh, help the comics devices library like be a, a constant like reliable and established resource. So yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of bumps into another question I had was what hopes do you have for the library and how people use it?
Well, I think it's pretty good so far the way people are using it. Like it's already like fulfilled a lot of its uh like intended purpose. Um, and I always really appreciate it when uh like teachers come up to me and tell me that it's really helpful for them to introduce like comics literacy into their classroom. Um, and then also for like comics creators who are teachers to um, like not only to use the library as like a way to teach fluency in comics, but also like to use each individual device as an exercise. So like create a layout based on this device, um, etc. etc. So uh, like that's really good. And uh, all this means that the real true purpose of the coins devices library will be achieved, which is that people just stop talking about comics as bam boom pow. Like just no, like no way. Uh and also to stop talking about comics as if it's like film. Uh because that's the closest art form that they often reach to. If they don't know how to talk about comics, they talk about film. So like that's like the main goal of the library is to just stop that from happening and just to have more people talk about comics as comics.
Take over the world with comics talk. That sounds good.
Hmm.
And then my last question, and for folks in the chat, I would love to see if you have any questions too. Um, my last question is, do you see any cultural differences in how people use comics devices, or does it feel like it's pretty universal as a language?
That one, I'm not sure yet.
Yeah.
um, like I try my best to source devices from different like comics cultures. So a lot of these devices are devices that I've seen across um like world comics. So Japanese comics has them, European comics has them, American comics have that, etc., etc. And one of the projects that I'm trying to do right now is try to find devices that are specific to uh like a comics culture. So like in Japan, for example, they have a really specific type of onomatopoeia. Um, and even other that is not shared by uh it's not really not shared. It's like there is really like a cultural crossover. So but it's a specific type of uh like uh like device that is used that is or that's originated from Japan. So like that's one of the things. That's also one of the things, and also like what I'm trying to find is like other devices that only exist because it's a comic from South America, for example, from Africa, uh, from India. It's just like because I think there's also like this idea in scholarship that comics making and comics reading is tied to your language. Like how you structure sentences, how you perceive time, and all of that. Like the language that you learn informs how you read or make a comic. Um, like that's a really prominent idea in comics scholarship, and I'm just curious if like that would that because of this like connection between like visual language and your actual language, whether would be a device that is like a very culturally specific device that arises from that. Um, but so far, both because the comics devices library is still very new, and also uh, it's mostly covering like universal quote unquote devices. I have not yet seen a difference between how comics creators use those devices, how they use the library differently. But, you know, that's a thing for the future for us to find out.
I'm excited to find that out. That'd be really cool to see. Um, all right, final call for any last questions. And also just want to say thank you so much again, Reimena. This is really absolutely a pleasure to listen to you talk about comic devices. Um, Lulo says time travel representation might be an example, left, right, up or down, spiral or circle, something like that. Um, and just want to share Reimena's information again in the chat. You can see comicsdevices.com and reimenayee.com, and you can find them also on Blue Sky as well. And this recording will be up in the co-op library within a couple of weeks, potentially on YouTube as well. And then before everybody goes, we do also have a feedback survey we'd love for you to fill out, and I will get that for you now. And yeah, thank you so much again, Reimena. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting me, and thank you everyone for sitting through this presentation and paying attention to it and being engaged in the subject matter. I really appreciate it, and I hope uh, you will enjoy learning about comics devices and incorporating it into your practice. And that's it. That's it for me. Yippee.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have the where did I put it? Always have it next to me. I moved everything today though. But I have the little printout version of the comics devices library and I use it all the time. It's so helpful.
Yay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, and there is a second edition uh
Ah,
available right now. It's currently
awesome.
available as an ebook, and that
Nice.
will be accessible through the store link in the Comics Devices Library. It's not in there yet, but it will be. And
Awesome.
and the second edition of the little zine that Jessie was talking about, it will be distributed through Sequential Artist Workshop. So that is the physical version that is available in America. Uh, so if you're keen on either the ebook version or the physical version, then you have options.
Yeah, awesome. I did notice, at least I think I noticed that you added new devices recently, or at least since I checked a long time ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was excited to see new things getting added, and it's like, this is great. There's even more to learn about.
We do have quite a bit of time for um, Q&A. So if you got any like questions about um, comics devices or like, you know, uh, some clarification regarding like the presentation, the floor is open for you. So if you got anything, please let me know. And if you've got nothing, that's fine too. we can we
I do
can
have a
leave
few
it.
questions, mainly because it's like uh, because the way I've been approaching comics is more of like through intuition of what I notice by just reading and like
Mm-hmm.
so naming those things is really hard. So I
Yep.
guess being able to name them is like a progression because it makes it more intentional rather than accidental. So how
Mm-hmm.
would you suggest someone to move from the intuition to the intentional usage of these devices?
Yeah, this is a really good question. Yeah, I this is also based on my experience and so like from like observation. A lot of cartoonists, I think most of all cartoonists learn how to make comics by reading comics. Uh, and then like over time, as we read more and more comics, we somehow pick up like the tricks that other artists use, and we manage to like organically like learn and uh, apply that into our own work. So it's um, like we don't really have like any like formal lessons about comics. We just read a lot, and then somehow we just know how to make comics. And uh, this is what I call like intuitive knowledge. So it's just like knowledge that you learn from experience from reading a lot, but you don't have like a specific like you don't have like a name or concept attached to that knowledge. Um, and that's basically like normal. That's how all cartoonists do it. Even I was doing that, but um, how to move on from that stage of like everything is just like white space into like turning that into like something concrete, like being able to like name and explain like the techniques that you're using, like how to get from that point to that point. um I think you have to first start by reading comics more actively and more critically and intentionally, and by that I mean like um if the basic way of reading comics is just opening a comics book and just like reading it and enjoying like the art and the dialogue, the active way of doing it, the critical way of doing it is that we are also asking questions on top of doing that normal reading. So as you are reading like a comic book, when you are seeing a layout, you need to ask yourself certain questions. So these questions can be like what we did here with the this Kevin Huizenga sequence. Like we are trying to ask ourselves, okay, so what is the meaning of this scene first? And then we ask ourselves, what am I feeling? Like what am I feeling emotionally, or like intellectually? Like what do I think this sequence is trying to tell me, and how am I responding to it? And then after that, jumping off from there, you start to ask yourself, okay, so what are the techniques that this cartoonist is using to create that response in me? So all these emotions that I'm feeling, all these thoughts I'm having, like what are the techniques that this cartoonist is using? And you don't necessarily need to know the names of devices to be able to like answer those questions, but it helps you a lot to give the thoughts a bit more structure, and like and then like once you've sort of like guessed like what sort of techniques that the cartoonist is using, then you can ask yourself, does it work? Is the cartoonist like using those techniques like effectively? Like is it like achieving the cartoonist like goal? And if not, would there be another way of doing it? Would there be an alternative like device or alternative layout that could be used to do it to do it a different way that may or may not be more successful? So like yeah, it's just like once you start adding these like questions when you are reading or learning about comics, you start to slowly build up that confidence and that familiarity with devices. And over time, it just becomes a bit more like it becomes more natural. You start to be able to like start like forming like giving names and shapes and forms to what you couldn't talk about before. And that's like basically that's just practice, and also like just reading a lot more comics. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it gives me an idea of what can be done. Another question I had is like I believe you said you curated the comics devices website.
Yes.
Mm, were the terms that you were using already existing, or did you have to come up with some of the names on your own to convey the idea?
It's a mix.
Okay.
Yeah, like especially like for like devices that already have like a existing like equivalent in other art forms. I just use the same name, so like match card. I don't have to create a new name for that. It already exists, so I may as well just use the same name. And there are some devices that are very unique to comics that have already been named by other people, by other cartoonists, or by other scholars. And then there are also some that has no names, so I had to like give it a name. So yeah, it's just like a mix.
Is it one that gave you most trouble naming and putting like a simple term to it?
Yeah, I have had a few devices that I needed a while to think about what to name it. Like for example, an easy one is this telltale balloon. Like this is a very comic specific device. You don't see it anywhere else. And this is very easy for me because the cartoonist who came up with this idea, who tried this concept, he already gave a name to it. So I just took the name from that. That's pretty simple. But there are some like I'm not sure if I had it in this slide here. I think some of the ones that are like for example, recto verso parallel. So that's a device that is about so you're using like two sides of a double page spread to that interacts with each other. So you like so like you have a panel on the left side of the page that is responding to whatever panel is on the right side of the page, and they are happening in parallel. So that's like recto verso parallel. And I came out with that name because recto and verso are terms that are used to refer to the left hand side and the right hand side of the page, and so and they're happening in parallel. So I just put them all together, and that's like how it comes about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's just like it's just mostly trying to figure out what is the like the name needs to describe the function itself. Like and the same goes for like the drawings that I made to describe the device as well. So like all those little drawings that show how the device is being used. That's also so in a way it's also the name of the device because like here like these little drawings that I did for telltale balloons and back panel and fore panel, they are like the visual names of devices. They also have described the function of the device itself. So like when I'm like trying to come up with like the name of device, I'm trying to think of like both like the visual form of the device and the textual explanation of the device. I'm trying to come out together. So that's kind of like my process for it. It can be a bit complicated sometimes. Not all the device is the same. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. I was just curious how someone curates something like this when it seemingly like it's a similar thing doesn't already exist, or it's like spread out all over the place. So it's like as you said, like in movies and photography and novels, like it seems like you can go to one place and get all the information on the devices from a single source. And then it's basically just my curiosity. How does someone curate something for this, like this, for a medium like comic that seemingly doesn't really have it? Because it seems to be very like you kind of get it as you do. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's like it is interesting because I think in practice we don't really have names for these devices. But the thing is that like there are people who are like studying comics, so all these like scholars and stuff, like they have been doing this for a very long time. They have been like trying to like give like names to like all the techniques and all of like the structure of comics like for a very long time. And not all of that like discovery flows back to like the other side of things, and the opposite relationship also happens. So like you have a lot of like, you also have like a few cartoonists who are also like doing their own work of like trying to figure out what comics is as an art form, and like trying to find all the devices for it. But because they're doing it on like such a underground, like very small scale type thing, it also does not flow back to the wider community and to academics. So it's just like we are already doing a lot of this work before. It's just that there hasn't been like a single source that puts all this information together into one place. So when I made this comics devices library, it's not like I'm starting from scratch from nothing. Like a lot of that information has already existed before. It's just a matter of like putting most of them together, and also like uh continuing that same work. So it's so like uh whenever I read a lot of comics or a lot of like academic texts, if I see anything that is like missing, then that's when I start trying to figure out what is the name of this new device. So yes.
Yeah, I guess it as you said, it's interesting that comics have been around for as long as film, but they haven't been really studied in a way film did. And I sometimes wonder if it's maybe because comics can be very non-linear by nature, and non-linear thinking can be hard for people to comprehend. I don't know how to say that, but it's like linearity is easy to understand. Well, in comics, you kind of have to create linearity yourself, even if the artist is guiding you through the page. So it's like kind of choose your own adventure in some like minute ways.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like I think I feel like film and poetry can be non-linear as well. Again, it really depends on how you structure it. But but my own personal theory for like why comics didn't really like have this type of uh interest in uh like solidifying this knowledge already is because I just think that like film just seeing from like the history of film and how it developed, it had a lot of support from like institution, and also a lot of the filmmakers, so all the directors and stuff, they are very serious about film as an art form. Like they treat it like this thing that needs to be studied and needs to be passed down to people. Like like that's what they think about film. And so because they already had this thinking, they act like it. So like they talk about film, uh they talk about like how to study film, how to interpret film, how to learn from the techniques of their masters, and like bring it down and like reference it and subvert it or whatever, like they they are very very interested in uh like like the artists themselves, not just the people who are studying, the artists themselves. They're very interested in like 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 being very intimate with the art form. But with comics, I feel like a lot of reason why we haven't done it yet is because like for a very long time, comics was thought of as a throwaway medium. Like it's not a serious art form. It's only for kids. It's only for silly things. And if you're and especially during like the 60s or the 70s or whatever, when comics were like trying to be this like edgy underground thing, um, there's this idea that if you're taking comics seriously, you're being like you're being cringe, you know, you're being like a sellout, you know,
Yeah.
like yeah, it's like this very weird idea that that a lot of the older generations had, and like because of this reluctance to uh like like treat comics like as an art form, like seriously, as a thing that you can study, as a thing that you can pass down to people, as community knowledge. Like, so we have had like decades and decades of like, you know, uh, like like knowledge that has not, there's just like being left on the table. Like people are just like ignoring it, and it's not like comics will collapse if we just keep ignoring it anyway, because like you said before, a lot of us learn how to make comics by reading it. So it's not necessary for us to like know the names of the devices in order to be good at it. But uh, at the same time, like being able to know this language, being able to know to talk about, being able to know how to talk about comics, you know, whether it's about your own work or other people's work. I feel like it's very important to know the language, because right now comics is starting to become more mainstream. It's starting to become like more accepted into like libraries and schools and like galleries or like institutions or whatever. So it's like comics is becoming more and more public, and uh, in order for comics to continue being successful as film, we need to be able to uh, convince other people, convince the public, the people who do not read comics, who do not already have this like organic knowledge that we have. Like we need to know how to speak to them, and to teach them about comics. So, uh,
Yeah.
so
When,
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
When I was looking into where to start with the stuff,
Mhm.
it felt like the whole comic creators community is very fragmented. It's
Mhm.
very like other than this cartoonist cooperative, which is a great initiative, I haven't really found a community that's working in this way. Uh, and like I feel like for the film, there's so many of these. For like other artists, arts like music, illustrations,
Mhm.
novels, poetry, there's so many of these like groups you can join to. But for comic, it's very fragmented. Like
Mhm.
artists and story like seems to be very. It's either like part of the big industry companies like Marvel, DC, like, or there's a mangakas and how they deal with comic. But even they're like it's a main person with a few assistants. So it's like it feels there's no much communication between different artists and creatives within the industry and sharing that type of knowledge.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe I haven't looked into it. But I feel like I would have found it easily if it was easily available. The comic cooperative was shared with me by a friend. I haven't really come across it by myself. So, and for film, if I look for a group, I can find a group.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. That's quite true. Uh, Again, I think it's just because like comics is quite late. Like we only just started doing all these things now.
Yeah, I mean, it's more
Yeah.
of just like an observation, and I feel like
Yeah.
at least when I was looking at the comics devices, I was like, oh, cool. I can actually be more conscious about what I'm actually doing. I don't have
Mm.
to like be like, is this the right way to do it? Because if I have a name, then I can look up examples of how other
Mhm.
people achieve similar effect, and then
Mhm.
makes it easier to come up to deliver the story, so to speak. So yeah,
Mm.
uh, more of like a conversation thing, and basically a thank you for making the curate library because it did like does help me as well. So maybe other and most likely other people in that way.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anika, like for coming and also like for asking like these really good questions. Uh, like I really appreciate it. I appreciate interest, and I hope that you know, that uh, in the future that you'll be able to start creating like your own groups as well, your own initiatives for comics.
Yeah.
Because we definitely need more like cartoonists being able to like do this type of like work.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And thank you for holding the presentation, even if it was just me and Nicole.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, like, I wanted to do this session anyway, just for people who can only make it this time. And yep.
Yeah.
Again,
Thank you.
thank you for coming. And yep, that's all for me for today. If you want to learn more about comics devices, you can go to comicsdevices.com for the library. So they will have the catalog of all like 70 comics devices. And of course, the summer camp is ending soon, but there's still like other like events and other like activities to like pursue anyway. So it's like again, please check out the Cartoonist Cooperative Hub for any more like activities for your camp. Also, don't forget to pick up your badges for the week. Yeah, so cool. Well,
Thank
wherever
you.
you are, have a good day slash evening, and I will see you soon.
Yeah. Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.
Good. Bye.